Maggie, a kind-hearted woman, ran a small-town diner for years. For days, she'd been setting out bits of food and leftovers for a quiet, stray Labrador who waited outside each morning. She never asked where he came from, just gave what she could. Then one morning, Homeland Security rolled up to her diner. Not for her, not for anyone inside. They'd come for that dog, and whatever brought them, it wasn't ordinary. What followed turned Maggie's quiet kindness into the center of something far bigger than she ever imagined. Welcome to Unraveled Whisper. It's time for another story that says more than it seems. Maggie Carson owned Brooks's Diner, a small place nestled between a weathered auto shop and a dusty pawn store on a quiet stretch of Nevada highway. She'd inherited it from her parents, first her father, then her mother, along with a few stack of debts and a lifetime of memories. She ran the place like it was all she had left, because, in many ways, it was. The diner was modest, just Maggie, Tony on the grill, and Rosa working the floor. The three of them had been together for years, more like a stubborn little family than co-workers. No titles, no fuss. They knew each other's rhythms, filled in for one another without asking, and shared quiet jokes no customer would ever catch. For years, Maggie was the one who made the place feel alive. Quick to laugh, quicker to chat, always gliding between booths with a steaming pot of coffee and some old country tune under her breath. Regulars loved her. Newcomers remembered her. The diner wore her touch in every corner, from the crooked menu board to the pie case that stuck on humid days. She knew everyone's name, remembered how they took their coffee, and always asked how their day was going. But that was before. A month ago, her golden Labrador, Nate, passed away in his sleep. 14 loyal years by her side, through the loss of her parents, her husband, and every rough season in between. He wasn't just a pet. Nate was her shadow, her constant. The quiet soul who waited by the door, curled under the pie counter during the lunch rush, and rode shotgun on late-night drives when she couldn't sleep. He always seemed to know when she needed comfort. Never loud, never needy, just there, head on her lap, still and steady. That kind of dog doesn't come around twice. He was home, and when he was gone, the diner felt hollow. So did she. Since then, something in Maggie had gone quiet too. She still opened the place before sunrise, flipped the sign to open, wiped every counter by hand. But the smile she wore for the morning crowd was different now. Practiced, polite, a habit more than a feeling. "Morning, Maggie," said Hank, a local regular, tapping the counter twice with his knuckles before sliding into his usual booth by the window. Maggie gave a nod from behind the counter. "Usual?" "You know me," he said with a grin. She gave him a polite smile, just enough to be kind, then turned to jot his order on a slip for the kitchen. That smile used to light up the room. Now it barely touched her face. The regulars noticed. So did the kitchen staff. But no one said much. Just a few softer voices, longer visits, and extra coffee left warming on the pot. Since Nate passed, Maggie moved through her days like she was stuck on autopilot. She opened the diner before sunrise, not because she had to, but because the silence at home was worse. She double-checked the inventory, even when every number was already where it should be. Rearranged the pastry case like it might distract her from the empty space under the counter where he used to nap. Took orders, handled the books. Smiled when expected, a practiced reflex, not a feeling. And when the diner grew still, when the clatter and small talk faded, she'd pull out her phone and stare at the picture. Nate, her golden Labrador, curled up in the back booth like he always did on slow afternoons. She'd just hold it there, thumb frozen above the screen, as if she could bring him back by refusing to look away. Sometimes she left his old water bowl behind the counter, like maybe she'd need it again. Sometimes she didn't even notice she had. Each day blurred into the next. Another week slipped by. Just like that. But something changed that morning. It was a Tuesday. Maggie stood behind the counter, quietly refilling the sugar jars, not because they needed it, but because her hands needed something to do. Her eyes drifted toward the window. The lot outside was mostly empty. A dull gray sky hung low. She wouldn't have noticed anything if not for the stillness. A dog, sitting just outside the glass door. Not just any dog, a golden Labrador. His fur was matted, streaked with dried mud, his legs speckled with dirt. thin enough that his ribs showed beneath the coat. But it wasn't the condition that stopped Maggie. It was the posture, the way he sat. Calm, still, waiting. Maggie froze, her hand resting on the coffee pot. Her breath caught in her chest. She blinked. It wasn't Nate. Of course not. But for a second, for the space of a single breath, it felt like a memory reaching out to her. The water bowl was still behind the counter. Nate's old one. She hadn't moved it in weeks. Without thinking, she reached beneath the counter and pulled it out. Dusty, but still there. Like some part of her had known she'd need it again. She rinsed it, filled it with cool water, and stepped outside. The dog didn't move. He just watched her, head tilted, ears perked slightly. Alert, aware. Then, slowly, he stepped forward. No fear, no hesitation. Lowered his head and drank. Long, deep gulps that said this was the first clean water he'd had in days. Maggie stood there, fingers twisting the hem of her apron, chest tight with something familiar and aching. She turned and pushed through the kitchen door. "Tony," she called, voice steady. "Got anything that won't kill a dog?" Tony looked up, raised an eyebrow. "Leftover eggs," he said, handing her a plate. "You got a visitor or something?" She nodded slightly, already turning back. "Just a stray," she murmured. When she returned to the sidewalk, the dog was still there, the water gone, but he hadn't left. Now he sat, waiting, watching. She placed the plate down gently and stepped back. "Eat, sweetheart," she whispered. "You've earned it." He moved slowly. No rush. Ate with quiet, deliberate bites. Not like a stray, more like a dog who'd been trained, taught to wait, taught to be calm. Maggie's breath caught again. "God," she whispered, "you eat just like him." The screen door creaked open behind her. Rosa stepped out, coffee pot in hand, eyes fixed on the dog. "Is that him?" she asked softly. Maggie didn't turn. "No," she said quietly, "but it's close enough to hurt." Rosa stood beside her, silent for a beat. Same coat, same ears, and the way he sits, that's spooky. Maggie gave a faint, bitter smile. The dog finished the eggs, licked the plate once, then stood, gave a single slow blink, like a thank you, and turned away. He didn't run, didn't wander. He walked with purpose, like he knew exactly where he was headed. Maggie stayed on the step, watching long after he vanished around the corner. The next morning, when Maggie stepped out back to check the ice delivery, she froze. There he was again, the same golden lab, same eyes, same steady posture. He lay near the dumpster, quiet and still, like he'd never left. She hadn't expected him. Strays didn't usually come back. Not like this. But he was here, watching her, silent. Something stirred in her chest, sharp, familiar. The way he tilted his head, the stillness in his body. It wasn't Nate, but for a second, it might as well have been. She lingered for a moment, then turned and headed into the kitchen. Tony glanced up from the grill as she grabbed a bowl and small plate. "That dog again?" Rosa, tying on her apron, moved toward the window. "You serious?" "He came back?" Maggie gave a quiet nod. "Guess he remembered." Tony chuckled. "What is this now, Maggie's diner and dog shelter?" She didn't answer, just stepped back outside. She set down the water first, then the plate, scrambled eggs and half a sausage patty. The dog didn't move until she stepped back. Then, slow and measured, he came forward. No flinching, no desperation, just trust. On the third day, he was there again. Same spot, same eyes. Maggie saw him as she unlocked the back door, sitting in the same position, like he'd never left. Still, watching. She paused, hand on the doorknob. That quiet patience, that steady gaze, too familiar. It was like opening a door to memory. She didn't speak, just fetched a bowl of water and 2 leftover biscuits wrapped in a napkin. He wagged his tail once, waited. Inside, Rosa peeked through the blinds as Maggie returned. "That dog yours now?" she asked, half smiling. "No," Maggie said softly. Then, after a breath, "Just reminds me of one that was." Her phone sat on the counter. The lock screen still showed Nate, golden coat, calm eyes, perched on the porch like he ruled the place. Her thumb hovered, then flipped its screen down. By the fourth day, no one asked anymore. They just started saving scraps. For Maggie's friend, Tony said with a grin, packing grilled chicken in a foil square. Rosa wrapped a slice of ham. He eats better than I do. Between the breakfast rush and the lunch crowd, someone always found a reason to step outside. Tony with a biscuit end, Rosa with half a grilled cheese, cornbread, potato wedges, even crusts from untouched sandwiches. It wasn't just kindness now, it was habit. Maybe it was the way Maggie looked at him, or maybe they all remembered Nate too. The regulars began to notice. Some smiled, some didn't. "That dog's been hanging around 4 days, a man muttered, stirring his coffee. "Health inspector ain't gonna love that." Maggie didn't reply, just looked out the window, where the lab lay curled under the side awning, nose tucked, tail wrapped, sleeping like he belonged there. But it didn't stop there. A mother gently tugged her son from the glass. "Honey, let's not get too close to that dog. We don't know if he's safe." Maggie heard her, didn't say anything, but it stayed with her. Later, a man at the counter leaned in. "You sure he's safe? My wife's kind of picky where she eats." Maggie placed the check on the table. "He's not bothering anyone." She walked off. She understood the hesitation. No collar, no tags, dusty coat, crusted mud on his legs. Not starving, but rough enough to raise eyebrows. But Maggie didn't see a stray anymore. She saw something else. She saw routine. She saw memory. She saw a dog who knew exactly where kindness lived. That night, after the last chair was flipped and the floors mopped, she stepped outside again. Rosa joined her out front. "He's got something about him," Rosa said, folding her arms. "Doesn't act like a stray." "I don't think he is," Maggie said quietly. "Not really." Maggie knelt down, brushing a burr from the dog's side. That's when she saw it, just under the dirt and tangled fur. She knelt down, brushing a burr from the dog's side. That's when she noticed something, just behind his ear, partly hidden under the dirt and tangled fur. There it was, a small line of letters and numbers, faint but clearly printed, a 17B3 as she read it aloud under her breath. It wasn't scratched in or messy. It was clean, precise, like it had been stamped there on purpose. Not the kind of thing a kid would scribble for fun, and definitely not something you'd expect on a stray. "Wait." Maggie leaned in. "What is that?" Rosa crouched beside her. "That's not normal, is it?" Maggie shook her head slowly. "Someone did this on purpose, like a label or something." "Who the hell labels a dog?" Rosa muttered. Maggie didn't reply right away. She just stared at the mark a second longer. It didn't feel cruel, but it didn't feel right either. She stood slowly, brushing off her hands. "I don't know what this means," she said, "but it's not just some stray." Rosa gave a quiet nod. The dog blinked, calm as ever. And for the first time, Maggie felt it too. She didn't know what it meant, but something about it felt important. Not dangerous, just unfinished. Like the beginning of a story she wasn't meant to know yet. She stayed there a moment longer, eyes locked with his. There was something in his gaze, steady, calm, like he already knew her. Rosa leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You adopting him or what?" Maggie didn't look away. "I don't know." She reached down, giving his ear a gentle scratch. "But tomorrow," she said softly, "I think I'll find him a name." The next morning, Maggie didn't just come with a name in mind. She came prepared. A simple red collar with a silver buckle, a small bag of dry food, and a cheap rubber ball tucked into her coat pocket. She didn't say anything about it to Rosa, but the way she placed it all behind the counter said enough. By mid-morning, she found herself glancing out the front window more than usual. The bell over the door jingled with each new customer, but it wasn't what she listened for. She looked out again, wiping her hands on her apron. Rosa caught her from behind the coffee machine. "Still looking out for your visitor from yesterday?" Her tone was playful, warm. Maggie smiled but didn't answer. She stepped outside briefly, scanning the alley near the dumpster and the edge of the parking lot. Nothing. Not even a paw print. He's probably off chasing rabbits or giving some poor mailman a heart attack, Rosa added with a smirk when she came back in. Maggie gave a quiet nod, half laughing. Maybe. But that morning was different, and not in the way she'd hoped. After 5 straight days of quietly showing up like clockwork, the dog simply didn't. Not today. Not even once. By the time the sun dipped low behind the hills, the collar still sat untouched. A few regulars made offhand comments. "That stray finally gone?" one of them muttered while buttering his toast. "Good. Wasn't sanitary having him hang around," another chimed in. But one older woman near the window had a different thought. "I kinda miss him," she said, sipping her tea. "He had kind eyes." Maggie smiled faintly, not trusting herself to say anything back. The diner closed late that night. Maggie waited a few extra minutes, stepping out onto the sidewalk one last time. The wind had picked up. Leaves scuttled across the pavement. Still, no sign of him. The next day, his second day missing, passed much the same. More glances out the window, more quiet checking. A few people asked about the collar now. "Did you get a dog or lose one?" Maggie just said, "Not sure yet," and left it at that. Customers kept their opinions mixed. One woman brought her toddler and asked if the dog would be around, saying her daughter had named him Captain Boots. Others weren't as fond. One man said, "Glad that mutt's gone. If he shows up again, I'm not eating here." Maggie just listened, but something about it all, the waiting, the wondering, began to wear on her. By the third morning of his absence, her hope began to show cracks. She lingered longer by the back door, checked the alley before her shift. She even brought a blanket she'd folded into a small crate near the wall behind the diner, but the spot stayed empty. She didn't talk about Nate often, not even with Rosa, but now, with every empty check, she felt that quiet ache again. The kind that doesn't scream, just sits heavy in the chest. He wasn't Nate, but that dog, he had stirred something, a flicker. Like maybe, for the first time in a long time, she could give her heart to something again. And now, even that flicker felt like it might go out. By the 5th day without him, Maggie didn't bring the collar in. She left it in her bag, zipped up tight. But still, every time that bell jingled above the door, her head turned, just in case. Then, on the 6th morning, just as she pulled into the lot, her heart kicked. He barked in short, sharp bursts, circling the same stretch of dirt, like he was chasing something just beneath the surface. His head stayed low, ears pinned, steps restless. A man from the auto shop next door muttered, "That dog's been at it for over an hour." Maggie got out slowly, watching him. Relief flickered, then uncertainty crept in. Inside, she poured a bowl of water and grabbed a leftover biscuit from the fridge. She slipped back out and placed them where she always did. But he didn't come. He barely looked, just kept pacing, nose to the ground, tracking the same path along the diner's outer wall, right where the old gas line ran beneath the gravel. Rosa watched through the window. "He's acting off, Maggie. Real off." By mid-morning, customers started to arrive. Some gave the dog wide eyes. A few wouldn't even get out of their cars. "Is he sick?" one woman asked, staying near the door. "Hope he's not going to snap," muttered another. Regulars filtered in slower than usual. A couple turned back around. The uneasy energy was thick enough to notice. Then, just before lunch rush, Tom Riley stepped in. Retired Army. Came in 3 times a week. Always sat at the counter. He didn't head straight to his seat this time. Tom walked to the window, studying the dog. His expression shifted from mild curiosity to focus, a sharp kind of recognition. He stepped outside without a word. Maggie followed, wiping her hands on her apron. "He's been like that since this morning. I tried giving him food, but—" Tom crouched a few feet from the lab. "That bark's not random," he said quietly. "He's alerting." The dog paused his pacing for just a moment, enough for Tom to see it. A faint tattoo on the inner ear, a 17B3. Tom stood slowly, eyes narrowing. "That's not a stray, Maggie. That's a military dog. A working K9. Maggie blinked. "You're sure?" He nodded. "That tag?" It's an ops ID. He's trained, and he's trying to tell us something. Tom came back inside, grabbed his phone and dialed, not 911, but something quieter. Director. This is Tom Brenner, he said. Possible Unit K9, marked and alerting. Location's a diner off Route 9. I'll hold here. He hung up and turned to Maggie. That dog's Homeland. Maybe special ops. I'd bet my pension. Maggie looked out the window again, the dog still pacing in quiet loops. But what's he trying to say? Tom's voice dropped. I don't know, but someone will. Help's already on the way. Less than 15 minutes later, they arrived. 2 black SUVs, a matte gray government truck, and a tan van marked with nothing but a number code pulled into the lot in silence. No lights, no sirens. The kind of silence that feels louder than noise. Doors opened in unison. Men and women in plain clothes, but unmistakable posture stepped out. Homeland Security, no question. One of them glanced down at the dog and immediately gave a signal. The mood shifted. Regulars shrank back. Rosa froze mid-pour. Maggie stood still behind the counter, her hands clenched, as one of the agents approached. Who's been in contact with the dog? Brenner stepped forward. She has. He came to her. The agent nodded once, then to Maggie. We'll need a few minutes. Please keep everyone inside. The dog had stopped barking. He stood now, alert, but still, watching, waiting. Agents moved with controlled focus. One approached the retired military man who had made the call, another crouched near the pacing dog. A third knelt near the building's foundation, just beside the alley. No sirens, no shouting, just quick instruments, hushed voices, and scanning equipment. Then the announcement came. Gas leak, one of the agents said, standing just outside the diner's back entrance. Deep one, under the southeast edge of the lot, near the main feed line, could have gone up with a spark. Silence. The dog, now unmistakably a K9 military Labrador, quieted. The urgent barking stopped, though he didn't sit. Not yet. He kept pacing, slower now, eyes on the agents as they moved, watching them understand. His message had finally been heard. A few heads turned toward him, as if seeing him for the first time. The man who had earlier complained about the dog gasped and covered her mouth. The man who said he wouldn't eat outside because of that mutt looked away, ashamed. A few of the regulars murmured quiet apologies no one had asked for. But Maggie didn't speak, her eyes locked on the dog. His ears still perked, his body still alert. But something had changed. The edge of desperation was gone. A Homeland agent approached Maggie, not brusque, but respectful. He's not a stray, the man said, voice low but certain. He's a registered K9, service ID A17B3, embedded just beneath the skin, Federal Search Division, Nevada sector. Maggie looked down at the dog. He had finally stopped pacing but hadn't sat yet, like he still didn't trust the danger was over. He lost his handler in a fuel depot explosion overseas, the agent continued. That was 4 months ago. The unit assumed he didn't survive either, but clearly, he found a way home. Maggie felt something in her chest fold inward, like a note sealed with care. He had been trained to find danger, and when he had no one left, he just kept doing his job. And now? She asked. The agent gave a slow nod. He's scheduled for retirement in a few months. We'll handle the next steps, but off the record. He glanced down at the dog, then back at her. He doesn't seem to be looking for a base anymore. As crews worked, another agent returned from the far end of the lot. Main valve shut, line pressure stable. It's fixed. Whole area is secure. Relief spread through the crowd like a wave. A diner regular turned to Maggie and whispered, "That dog saved all of us, didn't he?" Another voice added quietly, "Saved the whole diner." And we mocked him, one of the agents overheard. He paused near the door and said, "If that leak had gone another hour, this place would have gone up." He didn't just save you. He stopped a blast that would have leveled the whole block. Maggie didn't reply right away. She knelt beside the dog, gently this time, and reached into her apron. The same old biscuit she kept forgetting to toss. She set it down in front of him. He sniffed, then looked at her. He stayed, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. All that time, after what he lost, after what people said. He stayed, Tom the retired military man echoed beside her, because you fed him, and because you listened when no one else did. The agents began clearing up. The leak was patched, the risk gone. The dog finally sat, eyes still scanning, but more relaxed. Like, for now, he could let someone else carry the weight. The story faded from the headlines after a week. The agents packed up. The crater in the pavement was repaired. Life, as it does, settled back into rhythm. But some things didn't go back to how they were. 3 months passed, and in that time, Maggie's world quietly rewrote itself. Each morning now, the diner opened to the sound of the bell and the soft thud of paws across the tile. The golden lab, once a tense, watchful shadow, had become part of the place. His name tag read, Chase Retired, Loved. She'd picked the name the morning he vanished, called it out into the alley like a question. It stuck. Rosa called him her silent manager. Regulars brought treats. Kids asked to pet him. Even the health inspector didn't argue when he found Chase, curled under table 6 with one eye half open. Behind the counter, Maggie had placed 2 photos in a small frame. One showed a younger her with Nate, her first golden lab, now gone but never far. The other, taken last month at the K-9 retirement ceremony, showed Chase by her side, head pressed to her waist, like he'd always belonged there. Nate had been her heart. Chase had become her anchor. And somehow, in ways she hadn't expected, both had come home. That morning, as the bell above the door rang and voices filtered in, Maggie didn't glance up. She just smiled and reached down to scratch behind Chase's ear, because the one she used to wait for was already here, resting at her feet. If you've ever loved a dog, or had one love you back, you know that bond never truly fades. Stories like this remind us how deeply animals touch our lives in quiet, lasting ways. If this story moved you, please like, share, and most importantly, subscribe to Unraveled Whispers so you don't miss the next one. Every new video brings another heartfelt moment, another whisper worth hearing. Until then, take care, and we'll see you in the next story.